A generous man gave $350 to a homeless woman to help her feed her child. The following day, he was surprised to see her standing at the grave of his late wife, who had died 23 years earlier. William Collins sat in one of the finest restaurants in New York City, but the opulence around him meant nothing to him anymore. No amount of luxury could fill the void inside. His gaze drifted to the window, where he watched the rain pour down on the streets. The raindrops trickled down the glass like tears, echoing the sadness he carried within. The gloomy, overcast world outside perfectly mirrored his own inner state. Always dark, always rainy, always alone. It had been this way for more than 20 years, ever since his wife, Jennifer, had died in a heartbreaking accident. William had never recovered. Her passing left a wound that no amount of money or career achievements could ever heal. He had built an empire, but every success felt hollow. He went through the motions of life, attending meetings, fancy dinners, and social events. But it was all just a way to distract himself from the lingering sorrow he felt every day. He absent-mindedly swirled the wine in his glass, watching the liquid circle aimlessly, much like his life. Deals, high-end dinners, lavish parties, none of it excited him anymore. Everything seemed dull. He sighed deeply, feeling the weight of the years bearing down on him. The truth was, despite all his success, William was profoundly lonely. He had no children, or at least none that he knew of. Jennifer had never been eager to discuss having kids before she passed, and William hadn't pushed the subject. Now, it was one of his greatest regrets. He would give anything to have a part of her still with him, something of hers to cherish and protect. After paying the bill, he stood up and pulled on his wool coat. The restaurant buzzed with lively conversation and laughter, but to William, it was all just background noise, as distant as another world. He stepped out into the rain-soaked streets, where the cold, steady downpour continued. The city around him thrummed with energy, but William felt nothing but the chill of the rain and the weight of his loneliness. As he walked home, he passed places where he and Jennifer had shared moments together. Every street, every building carried a memory of a time when life had been simpler, when happiness had felt within reach. But now, all that was left were memories and a gravestone. Like most days, he planned to visit Jennifer's resting place tomorrow. Paris would have been the obvious choice for her burial, but for reasons William never fully grasped, she had picked New York. Maybe it had to do with the life they had begun here together. A life cut short, much too soon. As he strolled along the damp city streets, something caught his attention. Under the cover of a store's awning, a young woman sat hunched over, cradling a baby in her arms. Her hair was soaked from the rain, adding to the fragile look she had. The sight stirred something inside William. He paused, uncertain of what to do. Normally, this wasn't the kind of situation he would get involved in. Sure, over the years, he had donated generously to various causes, but he was not one for personal encounters with those in need. Still, there was something about this woman that made him stop. Maybe it was the careful way she held the baby, so gentle, sparking a memory or a feeling he couldn't quite place. William approached, his coat dripping from the rain. "Here," he said, taking out $350 in cash that he had just withdrawn. Handing it to her, he added, "Use this to get yourself and the baby some food." The woman glanced up, her eyes wide with shock, soon filling with gratitude. "Thank you," she murmured, her voice trembling. "Thank you so much." For a brief moment, William felt a shift within him, a connection to this stranger, as though their struggles were somehow linked. He didn't say anything else, just nodded and continued walking. But as he made his way down the street, he couldn't stop thinking about what had just happened. It was as if something inside him had been reawakened, something he hadn't realized was still there. When William finally made it home, he was drained, both physically and emotionally. He lay in bed, listening to the rain pattering against the window, his only company. He closed his eyes, but the image of the woman and her baby played over and over in his head. Tomorrow, like always, he would visit Jennifer's grave. But little did he know, that visit would alter his life forever. The next morning, William stuck to his usual routine. He woke up early, slipped on his tailored suit, and readied himself for his visit to Jennifer's grave. The gloomy sky outside mirrored his feelings, and the streets were still wet from the previous night's downpour. He grabbed his jacket and stepped outside, feeling the all-too-familiar weight in his chest as he prepared for yet another somber trip to the cemetery. As William made his way down the road, his thoughts drifted back to the young woman and her child. He couldn't figure out why their image lingered so vividly in his mind. Over the years, William had encountered countless people in need, but something about that particular meeting stuck with him. There was a look in the young woman's eyes, desperation mixed with something deeper, that he just couldn't put his finger on. It bothered him. When he arrived at the cemetery, William walked the usual path toward Jennifer's grave. The area was peaceful. The only sounds were the occasional rustling of leaves in the breeze and the distant hum of traffic. He was well acquainted with this place, too well. Every visit followed the same routine. He'd stand before her gravestone, talk to her as if she were still there, and leave, feeling the same hollow emptiness that had gripped him since the day she passed. But today felt different. As he approached her grave, William noticed something unusual. Someone was already there, kneeling at Jennifer's headstone. His heart skipped a beat. It was the same young woman he'd seen the night before, with her baby in her arms. She was hunched over, her shoulders shaking, as though she was crying. William froze, his mind racing. Why was she here? How could she have known about Jennifer? The coincidence was too strange, leaving him with an unsettling feeling. Slowly, he walked toward her. "Excuse me," he said softly, unsure of himself. The woman looked up, startled. Her eyes were red and swollen, and she quickly wiped her face with the sleeve of her worn-out jacket. "I'm sorry," she whispered, trying to gather herself. "I didn't mean to intrude." William shook his head, still grappling with the situation. "You were there yesterday," he said cautiously. "Outside the diner. I gave you some money." The woman nodded, glancing down at the baby in her arms, as if that answered everything. But for William, it didn't. He needed to figure out what was going on, why this woman, this complete stranger, was standing at his wife's grave. "What are you doing here?" William asked, his voice now more assertive. "How do you know Jennifer?" For a brief moment, the woman hesitated, as if deciding whether or not to respond. Then, after taking a deep breath, she lifted her gaze to meet his. Her eyes carried a mix of sorrow and determination. "Jennifer. She was my mother," she said softly. William felt as if the ground beneath him shifted. His breath caught in his throat, and for a split second, he wondered if he'd heard her right. He stared at the woman, utterly shocked, trying to process what she had just said. "Your mother?" he whispered, barely able to form the words. "That's impossible. Jennifer. She never had a child." The woman shook her head, her expression unreadable. "She did," she replied quietly. "She had me. She just never told you." William felt his world freeze. His mind raced to make sense of it all, but nothing seemed to fit. Jennifer couldn't have had a child. She would have told him. She wouldn't have kept that from him. Or would she? He took a step back, feeling the weight of this revelation hit him like a ton of bricks. "No," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "That's not possible. There's no way." "I know this is hard to believe," the woman said, her voice gentle but firm. "But it's the truth. My name is Sarah, and Jennifer was my mother." William's chest tightened as the reality of her words began to set in. He looked at the woman, Sarah, and then at the baby in her arms. A flood of questions swirled in his mind, but he had no idea where to start. How could this have happened? How could he not have known? "Why?" he asked, his voice cracking. "Why didn't she tell me?" Sarah looked down at the ground, her face filled with sadness. "I don't know," she said quietly. "I never got the chance to meet her. She passed away before I ever could. I was raised by another family." William's heart pounded in his chest. For over 20 years, he had mourned his wife, believing he knew everything about her. And now, out of nowhere, he was grappling with the idea that she might have held on to a secret so life-altering it could change everything. A truth that had been hidden for years, buried with her. He exhaled slowly, his mind spinning. "I don't get it," he said, shaking his head in disbelief. "Why now? Why did you come?" Sarah met his gaze, and for the first time, William saw something familiar in her eyes. There was a spark of Jennifer in them. "I learned about her a few months back," Sarah explained. "Since then, I've been trying to put the pieces together. And when I discovered where she was laid to rest, I had to come." William continued staring, still wrestling with the enormity of what she was saying. His emotions were a chaotic mix of confusion, disbelief, and anger. But beneath all of that, something else stirred. A faint flicker of hope. Hope that maybe, just maybe, his connection to Jennifer hadn't completely disappeared. His eyes drifted to the baby in Sarah's arms, and something within him shifted. If what Sarah was saying was true, if Jennifer had been her mother, then this child was his grandchild, a living part of Jennifer that still remained. For the first time in years, William felt something other than the weight of grief. He had no words, but he was certain of one thing: his life had just been altered in ways he never thought possible. William stood frozen, his eyes locked on Sarah. His mind was still trying to wrap around everything she had just shared. The wind stirred, shaking the leaves in the graveyard, but all he could hear was his heartbeat pounding in his ears. The baby in Sarah's arms stirred, letting out a small cry, and that sound jolted him out of his daze. "How? How can this be?" William asked, his voice barely above a whisper. His mind raced with questions. He felt betrayed, not just by the memories of Jennifer, but by the version of her he had mourned for over 20 years, as if she had been a completely different person. Still, even through the fog of confusion, he knew one thing. Sarah believed what she was saying. "I know it's a lot to take in," Sarah said, her tone soft but steady. "I've spent my entire life trying to make sense of it too, but I'm telling you the truth. Jennifer was my mother." William felt his chest tighten. "Why didn't she tell me?" he muttered, almost to himself. The thought that Jennifer had kept something so enormous from him felt unbearable. He had spent countless nights lying awake, imagining what their life could have been like if things had gone differently. Now, those what-ifs seemed to take on a completely different, more painful meaning. Sarah shook her head slowly, her eyes full of understanding. "I don't know why she kept it from you. I never got the chance to ask her. She passed away when I was just a baby." William's mind raced, trying to focus. There had to be more to this story. "Who raised you then? If Jennifer was your mother, how did I never know about you?" Sarah shifted uncomfortably, looking down at the ground, as if the weight of her answer was too much to bear. "After she passed, I was placed with another family. I grew up not knowing anything about my real parents until recently. All I had was a name, and some small details I managed to put together. I didn't even know where to start looking for you until a few months ago." William's heart hurt. He had lived all this time thinking he knew everything about Jennifer, only to find out there were parts of her life he never even imagined. "So, you came here, looking for answers?" Sarah nodded. "Yes. I needed to understand who she was. I needed to know why she kept me hidden. And once I found out where she was buried, I knew I had to come." William's eyes fell to the gravestone, Jennifer's name etched into the cold, hard stone. For so long, he had visited this grave, speaking to her, trying to find peace with her loss. But now, with Sarah and the baby standing beside him, that peace was gone. Everything felt different. His memories, his grief, his entire view of who Jennifer had been. He took a deep breath, trying to find something steady in this overwhelming wave of emotion. "And this baby," William's voice wavered as he motioned toward the child in Sarah's arms. "Is this my grandchild?" Sarah looked down at the baby, a soft smile breaking through her tension. "Yes," she said quietly. "His name is Michael." William stared at the baby, so tiny and fragile. His heart swelled with a flood of emotions, shock, disbelief, and something else he hadn't felt in a long time, hope. For William, Michael represented a tie to Jennifer, a connection to the life he never knew existed, a life hidden away from him, but one that he now had a chance to embrace. As the realization hit him, the sheer weight of it felt almost unbearable. For so many years, William had been trapped in the past, grieving for Jennifer and the life they had lost together. Yet now, standing here, he began to understand that their life hadn't vanished entirely. It had gone on, quietly, without him. And now, fate was offering him a piece of that lost life back. But the betrayal still gnawed at him. How could Jennifer have kept this secret from him? How could she make such a huge decision without ever telling him she was pregnant? "I just don't understand," William finally said, his voice strained. "Why would she keep you from me? Why would she go through all of that alone?" Sarah's expression softened, though her eyes still held a sadness. "I don't know all the details, but I can guess. Maybe she thought you wouldn't want the responsibility of a child, or maybe she believed you were too absorbed in your work to be a father. I wish I knew." William shook his head, feeling the weight of her words settle deep within him. "But she should have let me decide. I deserved that choice." Sarah nodded gently. "Maybe she was afraid. Maybe she didn't know how to tell you. Or maybe she thought she was protecting you." The thought that Jennifer might have hidden Sarah from him out of some misguided attempt to shield him left William torn. He had always believed Jennifer trusted him, that they were partners through everything. Now he realized there were sides of her he had never truly known. His eyes met Sarah's again, and for the first time, he felt an unexpected connection, not just to Sarah, but to the life he had never known existed, to the future that had slipped away, but might now be within reach again. "What do you want from me?" William asked quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarah hesitated, then met his gaze. "I don't want anything from you. I just want to know where I come from. And I think you deserve to know the truth about your wife." William nodded, letting her words sink in. The truth about Jennifer, the truth he had lived so many years without. He didn't know what would come next, but one thing was clear: his life would never be the same. There was no way to return to how things used to be, and maybe, just maybe, that wasn't entirely bad. William stood frozen, struggling to process the weight of Sarah's revelation. Jennifer had a daughter, his daughter, a child he never knew existed, kept hidden from him for all these years. The sense of betrayal hit hard, but it was mixed with confusion, regret, and a new feeling he hadn't anticipated: responsibility. Sarah, holding the baby, was living proof of a past he was excluded from. Yet now, they stood before him, undeniable. "I still don't get it," William finally said, his voice gentler now, the initial anger fading into something more subdued. "Jennifer never told me she was pregnant. How could she hide this from me?" Sarah's eyes softened with understanding. "I don't know what her reasons were, William. I've asked myself the same question so many times, but there were never any clear answers. All I know is she made that choice, and it's impacted both of us." William exhaled deeply, his mind racing. Jennifer had always been reserved, even with him. They had argued often about how guarded she could be, but this was a secret beyond anything he had ever imagined. "Do you know anything about why she did it?" William asked, his tone hesitant, almost fearing the response. Sarah sighed, glancing down at the baby in her arms. "I wish I knew more. The people who raised me didn't have much information about her either. I've spent months trying to figure it all out, but there are so many missing pieces. But one thing I do know for sure. She loved you." William's eyes widened at that. "She told you that?" "No," Sarah whispered, shaking her head gently. "But I've seen it in everything I've uncovered about her. The way she spoke about you to others, the way she lived. It was clear you meant a lot to her, even if she kept some things from you." William clenched his jaw, overwhelmed by frustration and grief. He had spent years trying to come to terms with Jennifer's death, believing he had moved on from the future they would never share. But this revelation had torn open old wounds he thought had long healed. Now, it wasn't just about losing his wife. He was grieving for a life he never knew existed, the daughter he never had the chance to raise. "And you." "Why now?" William asked, his voice tight with emotion. "Why did you choose to find me now?" Sarah met his eyes with a calmness that caught him off guard. "I didn't even know Jennifer was my mother until a few months ago," she explained. "Before that, all I had was a name and a vague story about my adoption. When I found out the truth, I knew I had to come here. I had to learn more about who I really am and where I came from. To be honest, I wasn't sure what I would uncover." William felt his throat tighten. He could see the weight Sarah carried, reflected in her eyes, the burden of a past she couldn't access. And now, that weight was being placed on him too. He glanced down at the baby in Sarah's arms, now peacefully sleeping. The gentle rise and fall of the baby's chest felt surreal to William. This was his grandson, his flesh and blood. A living connection to Jennifer, a part of the life they shared that had been hidden from him for so long. "Michael," Sarah said, almost as if she could sense what he was thinking. "His name is Michael." William's eyes softened as he looked at the baby. "Michael," he repeated quietly. The name felt foreign on his lips, yet it grounded him in a way he didn't expect. For years, he had drifted through life without a true sense of direction. But now, standing here with Sarah and Michael, something inside him was shifting. "I didn't come here to ask for anything," Sarah said, breaking William out of his thoughts. "I don't expect you to be a part of my life or Michael's life. I just needed to know the truth, to understand where I came from. And now, I do." William looked at her, feeling a deep tug in his chest. He didn't know what she was hoping for, but he knew he couldn't walk away. Not from this. Not from her. "You're my daughter," William finally said, the words heavy on his tongue, foreign and unfamiliar. He had never imagined saying them, Certainly not like this, standing at his wife's grave in a cemetery. And that makes Michael my grandson. Sarah watched him carefully, unsure of what he was leading up to. I've spent my whole life building something, William said softly, but with conviction. But none of it ever really mattered. Not until now. After Jennifer passed away, I felt completely lost. But now I'm starting to realize there's still time for me to make things right. Maybe I can be more than just a businessman. Sarah blinked, her face a blend of surprise and doubt. What do you mean? I'm saying that if you'll let me, I want to be a part of your life. William's voice wavered slightly. I've missed so much already, but I don't want to miss any more. Sarah studied him, her expression hard to read for a moment. William noticed the uncertainty in her eyes. She was clearly hesitant about letting someone she barely knew into her life. But there was also a glimmer of hope, a hope that maybe, just maybe, this could be a fresh start. I'm not sure it'll be easy, Sarah finally said, her voice soft. There's so much we don't know about each other. William nodded in agreement. I get that, but I'm willing to give it a shot if you are. Sarah glanced down at Michael, and then back at William. Okay, she said quietly. We can try. For the first time in what felt like forever, William felt a tiny spark of warmth in his chest. It wasn't much, but it was something. Something that gave him hope that, despite all the loss and heartache, there was still something worth holding on to. As William left the cemetery that day, his mind was spinning with emotion. Learning that Jennifer had kept such a huge secret from him gnawed at him. Sarah and Michael were now a part of his life he never expected. His carefully planned life felt like it had been turned upside down in just a few short hours. The city buzzed with its usual energy, but William drifted through it, feeling disconnected. His meeting with Sarah had rattled him deeply, making him question everything he thought he knew about his past. As much as he wanted to be angry, to feel betrayed by Jennifer, he couldn't shake the sense of responsibility that had settled on him. Sarah was his daughter, and Michael was his grandson. He couldn't just walk away. Later, back in his apartment, the rain had started again, softly tapping on the windows as William stood in the dim light, staring out at the city. His thoughts wandered back to Jennifer, her smile, her laugh, the way she used to gaze at him, the dreams they once shared before everything fell apart. He had spent years trying to hold on to her memory, keeping her alive in his heart through the weight of his sorrow. But now, with Sarah's revelation, William began to question if he had ever truly known Jennifer at all. Why had she kept this from him? What had been going through her mind in those final months of her life? The questions swirled in his head, insistent, demanding answers that felt impossible to uncover. William walked over to his desk, where he kept a small collection of mementos from his time with Jennifer, old pictures, letters, and small keepsakes that once held meaning for both of them. He picked up a photograph of the two of them from their early days, back when everything seemed so hopeful. They looked so joyful, so deeply in love. He couldn't reconcile that image of Jennifer with the woman who had concealed something so significant from him. Sitting down, William reached into the drawer and pulled out a worn journal. He hadn't opened it in years. It was Jennifer's, something she had written in sporadically during their marriage. He had found it after she passed, but had never been able to bring himself to read it, fearing it would only deepen the pain. Now, though, it seemed like his only chance to make sense of what had happened. With a deep breath, William began to leaf through the journal. The handwriting was familiar, that same graceful script he had seen in countless notes and letters over the years. He skimmed the pages, reading her thoughts on everyday moments, dinners they shared, trips they took, yet nothing seemed out of the ordinary. He was searching for something, anything that could explain why she had kept Sarah a secret from him. And then, toward the back of the journal, he found it. The entry was dated just a few months before Jennifer's death. As William's eyes scanned the page, his pulse quickened. "I don't know what to do. I'm terrified. How could I let this happen now after all these years? William will never understand. He's so wrapped up in the business, in our future, and I can't be the one to take that away from him. He deserves more than I can give. I wish I could tell him, but it would break him. I can't let him see me like this. I can't let him know." William's chest tightened as he read those lines. She had been afraid of how he would react. He couldn't shake the fear of how the pregnancy might have impacted their lives. But why hadn't she trusted him? Why did she believe he wouldn't want to be involved? The truth hit him hard, like a punch in the gut. Jennifer hadn't kept Sarah from him because she didn't want him to know. She had done it because she thought she was doing the right thing for him. She had been trying to protect him in her own way, sparing him the weight of raising a child when life was already so complicated. William sank into his chair, the weight of it all crashing down on him. It wasn't betrayal that made Jennifer keep Sarah a secret, it was fear. Fear of how he'd react, fear of how everything would change. And maybe, just maybe, she was trying to protect him from the pain she was already carrying. But now, that choice had left its mark. Sarah had grown up without knowing her father, and William had missed out on being part of her life. And Michael. William couldn't even wrap his head around the fact that he had a grandson. He shut the journal, his mind spinning. There was no way to undo what had been done, no way to reverse the choices Jennifer made. But there was still a way forward. Sarah had come to him looking for answers. And now, more than ever, William knew he couldn't turn away. He stood up, determination settling in. If there was one thing he could still do, it was to be there for Sarah and Michael. He had already lost too much time, and he wasn't about to lose any more. The next morning, William made up his mind. He had to reach out to Sarah. He had promised her he would try, and now, more than ever, he intended to keep that promise. He didn't know exactly how it would work, or how they would handle all the complicated emotions between them, but he was ready to figure it out. He picked up the phone and dialed the number Sarah had given him. His heart pounded as he waited for her to answer, unsure of what to say when she did. After a few rings, her voice came through, gentle but steady. "Hello? Sarah?" William started, his voice shaky with nerves. "It's me, William. I've been thinking about everything and I think we need to talk." There was a long pause and William held his breath, not knowing how she would react. Finally, Sarah's voice came through. "Yeah, I think we do." William let out a slow breath, feeling some of the weight lift from his chest. It wasn't much, but it was something. And right now, that was enough. The next time he saw Sarah, they met at a quiet little cafe tucked away from the busy city streets. He had chosen the place carefully, personal yet neutral. A space where they could talk without the heavy shadow of the past overwhelming them. He arrived early, fidgeting with the collar of his shirt as he settled at the table, nerves buzzing. His mind was still reeling from everything he'd read in Jennifer's journal. It had given him a glimpse into her thoughts, bringing him closer to understanding. But it also intensified the pain of not being able to ask her the reasons behind her decisions. As Sarah walked in with Michael in her arms, William looked up. She spotted him right away and headed over, her face calm but guarded. Her movements were tense, like she wasn't sure how this meeting would go. "Hi," she said softly, easing into the chair across from him. She adjusted Michael in her arms, making sure he was comfortable, before turning her attention back to William. "Thanks for coming," she said. William nodded, swallowing the nervous lump in his throat. "Of course," he replied, his voice a bit rougher than he intended. He glanced at Michael, who was peering up at him with wide, curious eyes, though still quiet. "How's he doing?" William asked. Sarah gave a small smile, gently stroking Michael's head. "He's doing well, growing fast." For a moment, they sat in silence, both unsure how to approach the conversation that hung between them. William cleared his throat and decided to just jump in. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said," he began, his tone soft but serious, "and I found something that might explain why Jennifer didn't tell me about you." Sarah's expression shifted slightly, curiosity mixing with hesitation. "What did you find?" she asked, her voice cautious. William paused for a moment before reaching into his jacket. He pulled out Jennifer's journal and slid it across the table toward her. "It's her journal, from the last year of her life. She wrote about her fears, why she kept you a secret." Sarah stared at the journal, her fingertips lightly brushing the cover, but she didn't open it. "She wrote about me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. William nodded. "She didn't mention you directly, but it's clear she was afraid. Afraid of how I'd take the news. Afraid of what having a child would do to our lives. She thought she was shielding me by keeping it a secret." Sarah's expression softened as she placed her hand on the journal for a brief moment before pulling it away. "I've spent my entire life wondering why she didn't want me," she spoke quietly, her voice carrying a sadness William hadn't seen in her before. "It's tough, hearing that it wasn't just about me, that she was trying to protect you, too." William leaned in closer, his gaze searching hers. "It wasn't that she didn't want you, Sarah. I realize now that she was overwhelmed. She didn't know how to handle everything. But that doesn't mean she didn't love you. I think she was just lost." Sarah let out a long breath, her shoulders dropping slightly. "I guess I always thought that if I found out why she gave me up, it would give me some kind of closure. But now, it just feels complicated." William nodded in understanding. "I know, it's not simple. But if there's one thing I've learned, it's that we can't change the past. We can only decide what to do with the present." There was a brief silence, and William watched the emotions cross Sarah's face. Sadness, confusion, but there was also a flicker of relief. It seemed like hearing about her mother had lifted part of the burden she had carried for so long. "I don't know what to do with all of this," Sarah admitted, her voice barely audible. "I've spent so much time being mad at her, at you, and now I don't know how to feel." William's heart ached at the rawness in her voice. He wanted to say something that would make things better, but he knew it wasn't that simple. They were both trying to make sense of the tangled mess left behind. "I understand," William said gently. "I've been angry too. But maybe we can figure this out together." Sarah looked at him, her eyes searching for some kind of reassurance. "Do you really want to be in my life? After all this?" "I do," William said without hesitation. "I've already missed out on so much time, Sarah. I don't want to lose any more. If you're willing to give this a chance, then so am I." Sarah was quiet for a moment, then slowly nodded. "I'm willing to try. But I need time, William. This is a lot to process." William reached across the table, his hand lingering near hers but not quite touching. "I get it," he said. "We'll take it slow. There's no need to rush." Sarah looked down at Michael, fast asleep in her arms, then back at William. "You know, he doesn't have a grandfather," she said quietly, a small smile forming. William's heart swelled. "I'd like to change that," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. Sarah gave a slight nod, a tear rolling down her cheek before she quickly wiped it away. "I think Michael would like that too." For the first time in years, William felt a glimmer of hope. It was fragile, but it was there. He had spent so long believing his life had ended when Jennifer passed, convinced there was no way to move forward. But now, sitting here with Sarah and Michael, he realized there was still something worth fighting for. They sat quietly for a while, the weight of their shared history lingering in the air. But something else was there too, a new connection, a chance to rebuild what had been lost. As they left the cafe, William walked beside Sarah, feeling the warmth of the sun peeking through the clouds for the first time that day. It was a small, barely noticeable shift, but to him, it felt like a sign. For the first time in a long while, William allowed himself to hope that maybe, just maybe, the future could offer more. In the days after their cafe meeting, a cautious optimism began to grow. William and Sarah started seeing more of each other, though always with a bit of hesitation, as if both were afraid that one wrong move could shatter the fragile bond they were slowly building. William was determined to show Sarah he was serious about being a part of her life, but he also understood her need for space. It wasn't easy. Every time he looked at her, he was reminded of all that he had missed, how much time had slipped away, and while he was eager to start this new chapter, the past still weighed heavily on him. His thoughts often drifted back to Jennifer and the choices she made. He had spent years idealizing her, putting her on a pedestal, and now it was hard to reconcile that with the woman who had kept such a life-altering secret from him. One evening, after an especially long day, William sat alone in his living room, nursing a glass of whiskey. He hadn't been in touch with Sarah for a few days, and though he wanted to check on her, he was careful not to overstep her boundaries. It was a tricky situation, one he didn't know exactly how to handle. He realized that pushing too much might push her further away, but holding back too much could mean missing out on a chance he wasn't sure he'd get again. His phone buzzed on the table, pulling him out of his thoughts. It was a message from Sarah. "Can we talk tomorrow? There's something I need to tell you." William's heart raced. The message was short, but it carried undeniable weight. He quickly responded, agreeing to meet her, and leaned back in his chair, his mind running through countless possibilities. What did she want to tell him? Was it about Michael, or maybe Jennifer? Was it some new piece of information that would make everything clearer? The next morning, they met at a small park near Sarah's apartment. Michael was with her, bundled up in his stroller, and as William approached, he could sense the tension in her posture. She smiled when she saw him, but it was strained, not reaching her eyes. "Hey," she said quietly, her voice tense. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," William replied, feeling his concern grow. "What's going on?" Sarah motioned toward a nearby bench, and they sat down, facing the still water of the lake. The reflection of the clear blue sky on the surface contrasted sharply with the tension hanging between them. William could tell that whatever Sarah needed to say was weighing heavily on her. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," Sarah began, her hands nervously twisting in her lap. "About everything. About you, my mum, Michael." She paused, her eyes fixed on the water, avoiding his gaze. "And there's something I haven't told you." William's pulse quickened. He kept his face composed, but the tension inside him was undeniable. "You can tell me anything, Sarah. Whatever it is, we'll handle it together." Sarah nodded, but still didn't meet his eyes. She kept her focus on the lake, her voice barely audible. "I've always wondered why my mum never told you about me. I used to think maybe it was because she didn't want to put that on you. Or maybe she was afraid of how you'd react. But I came across something recently. Something that might shed light on everything. William felt his breath hitch. "What did you find?" he asked. Sarah paused for a moment, then slowly reached into her bag and pulled out a small, folded note. She handed it to William, her gaze finally locking with his. He could see the fear and sorrow in her eyes. With slightly trembling hands, William unfolded the note. It was old, worn around the edges, and the ink had faded a little. The handwriting was unmistakable. It was Jennifer's. He began to read, his heart racing. "William, I'm not sure if you'll ever read this, but I have to write it anyway. I've been keeping something from you. Something I don't think I'll ever be brave enough to tell you in person. I'm pregnant, and I'm scared. I know you've always said you didn't want kids, and I've respected that. But now, with this news, I don't know what to do. I don't want to lose you, but I also don't want to put you in a position you never wanted to be in. So I've decided to keep this from you. Not because I don't love you, but because I do. One day, I hope you'll forgive me." William's hand trembled as he finished reading. He stared at the letter, unable to wrap his mind around the words. Jennifer had been pregnant, and she'd made the choice to keep it from him, thinking it was what he wanted. All because of something he had said years ago, long before they got married. I don't understand," William whispered, his voice barely audible. "I never told her I didn't want kids. Maybe I said something offhand when we were younger, but I never meant it that way. I thought we'd figure it out together." Sarah looked at him, her expression soft with empathy. "I think she was just scared, William. She didn't want to lose you, and she thought this was the only way to hold on to you." William shook his head, the weight of the truth crashing down on him. All these years, he believed he and Jennifer were on the same page, that they understood each other completely. But now, he realized they had been living in different worlds of fear and expectation, and those unspoken things had pulled them apart in ways he had never imagined. "I didn't know," William said, his voice trembling. "If I'd had any idea, I would have been there for her. I would have been there for you." Sarah rested her hand gently on his arm, the gesture both comforting and grounding. "I know. Maybe deep down she knew too, but she made the decision she thought was right at the time. And now we're here." William's eyes welled up, and for a moment, he couldn't find the words. The weight of everything they had, lost all the missed opportunities, felt almost unbearable. But Sarah was right. The past couldn't be undone. All they could do now was move forward. William glanced at Sarah, the daughter he had just begun to know, and then at Michael, the grandson who had entered his life in such an unexpected way. "I don't want to waste any more time," William said, his voice firm despite the tears. "I want to be part of your life, Sarah. I want to be there for Michael. It doesn't matter how complicated it gets. We'll make it work." Sarah smiled, her own tears spilling over as she nodded. "I want that too." They sat together in silence for a few minutes. The burden of the past still hung over them, but a glimmer of hope for the future began to shine through. It wasn't going to be easy. There were still so many things left unanswered, so much to figure out. But for the first time, William felt like they were ready to move forward. Together. The days following their conversation at the park seemed to crawl by for William. His mind kept drifting back to the letter Sarah had shown him. Jennifer's words echoed in his thoughts. She had made her decision in response to a fear she had never even acknowledged. That fear had changed both of their lives in ways William hadn't imagined. He had always seen himself as someone who controlled his life, his choices, and his emotions. But now, confronted with the fallout from desires left unsaid and fears misunderstood, he was struggling to comprehend it all. One night, William found himself sitting alone in his study, a drink in hand, staring at Jennifer's journal and the letter Sarah had given him. The quiet buzz of the city outside felt out of place compared to the stillness of the room. He felt caught between the life he had once known and the new reality that had surfaced, unsure how to bridge the gap between them. He had always pictured having children. He used to daydream about it, envisioning a future where he and Jennifer would start a family together. But life took them in different directions. His job, their adventures, the endless possibilities that kept them busy. Talking about kids was something they kept postponing, thinking there'd be time for it later. But later never came. What really stung was realizing that a casual comment he made years ago had been enough for Jennifer to hide such a life-altering secret from him. William couldn't even recall the exact conversation. They were still young, not too far into their relationship, and he likely said something about not being ready for kids, or maybe even not wanting them at all. But it wasn't meant to be a final decision. He always thought they'd sit down and talk it through one day. But that day never came. Jennifer had gone ahead and made the choice on her own. Taking a deep breath, William looked down at the stack of papers on the table in front of him. His feelings about Jennifer were muddled now. Long-lasting love, remorse, and frustration were beginning to replace the sorrow he had been carrying for so long with something much more complex. He still loved her, and in some way he always would. But that love was now intertwined with a profound sense of loss. Not just for Jennifer, but for the life they could have shared, for the family they never built. And then there was Sarah, the daughter he never knew he had. Jennifer had kept Sarah a secret, trying to spare him from what she thought would be a burden. But William would have embraced it gladly. He wanted to be a part of Sarah's life now, to make up for the time that had been stolen from them. But he wasn't sure how to bridge the gap between them. They were practically strangers, linked by blood, but divided by years of silence and hidden truths. As much as he wanted to dive into the roles of father and grandfather, he knew it wouldn't be easy. Sarah had lived her own life, shaped by her own struggles, and carried her own pain. He couldn't just show up and expect to fill a void that had existed for so long. He'd have to earn her trust and earn his place in her life, and that would take time. The buzz of his phone interrupted his thoughts. It was a text from Sarah. "Are you free tomorrow? Michael has a doctor's appointment in the afternoon, and I was wondering if you wanted to come with us. No pressure, just thought you might want to be there." William stared at the message, his heart swelling with equal parts hope and nervousness. Sarah was extending a hand, inviting him into her and Michael's life, offering the chance to start fresh together. Without hesitating, he tapped out a quick response, trying not to second-guess himself. "I'd love to join. Just let me know the details." As soon as he pressed send, a wave of relief hit him. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. He wasn't sure what to expect or how it would feel to take on this new role, but he was willing to give it a shot, for Sarah, for Michael, for the family he had lost, and the one he still had a shot at being part of. The next day, William met Sarah outside the pediatrician's office. She stood near the entrance, Michael bundled in his stroller, looking both anxious and relieved when he saw William. William couldn't help but grin as he approached them. Michael's wide eyes peered up at him from under his hat, and in that instant, all of William's uncertainties faded away. "Hey," Sarah said softly, her voice warm but cautious. "Thanks for coming." "Of course," William responded, kneeling down to get closer to Michael. "How's this little guy doing?" "He's good, a bit cranky, but nothing too bad. Sarah gave a small smile, adjusting the blanket around Michael. I thought it'd be good for you to be here, to spend some time with him. William's heart swelled at her words. He understood that this wasn't easy for her. Sarah had built up her defenses, and with good reason. But she was making an effort. That meant more to him than he could put into words. They walked inside together, chatting casually as they waited for Michael's appointment. William found himself observing Sarah closely. How she interacted with her son. The gentle way she spoke. How she seemed to know exactly what Michael needed. It was both touching and bittersweet. He couldn't help but wonder what it might have been like if he'd been there from the start, part of her life all along. But there was no point in looking back. He was here now, and that was what mattered. The doctor's visit was routine, just a regular checkup, but for William, it felt significant. Sitting next to Sarah, watching the doctor weigh and measure Michael, William realized these were the moments he had missed out on his whole life. The everyday parts of parenthood are seeing a child grow and discover the world. It wasn't flashy or extraordinary, but it was real. It was the kind of bond he had been craving without even realizing it. As the appointment ended and they stepped back into the cool afternoon air, William turned to Sarah, his throat tightening. "Thank you," he said, his voice soft yet genuine, "for letting me be a part of this." Sarah glanced at him, her expression softening. "You're welcome. I want you to be part of it. I know it won't be easy, but I think we can make it work." William nodded, feeling the weight of her words. They were on the same wavelength, both cautious but hopeful, both willing to do what it took to create something new together. As they stood there, watching the sun dip behind the city skyline, William allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was still time. Time to mend old wounds, time to be the father and grandfather he had always wanted to be. As days turned into weeks, William found a cautious optimism taking root inside him. He was spending more time with Sarah and Michael, discovering a rhythm in their interactions that felt both strange and comforting at the same time. A delicate but sincere connection gradually replaced the initial awkwardness of their new relationship. William was careful not to push too much, letting Sarah set the pace while making it clear that he was committed to being part of their lives. One afternoon, Sarah invited him over to her apartment for the first time. It was a humble space, small but inviting. And as William walked in, he noticed the care Sarah had taken in making it a home for herself and Michael. Toys were scattered across the living room, and a soft blanket was thrown over the couch. The air carried the light scent of baby lotion and freshly brewed coffee. "Make yourself at home," Sarah said, gesturing toward the couch as she lifted Michael out of his stroller. "I'll get us some coffee." William nodded, settling onto the couch, taking in the room around him. A flood of mixed emotions washed over him. He felt proud of what Sarah had built, but there was also a profound sadness that he hadn't been there to see any of it. He had missed so much, and no matter how much he tried to move forward, that sense of loss would always linger. As Sarah moved into the kitchen, William's eyes landed on a small framed photo sitting on the bookshelf. It was a picture of Sarah and Michael, both beaming at the camera, their eyes full of happiness. It was a simple snapshot, but it struck him deeply. He realized that he was sitting with a family he had never known, one he was only just beginning to understand. A few minutes later, Sarah came back, carrying 2 steaming mugs of coffee. She passed one to William and took a seat across from him, carefully settling Michael on her lap. The baby made soft, cooing sounds, his little fingers reaching up to play with his mother's hair. "So," Sarah began, breaking the peaceful silence, "I've been thinking a lot lately About everything. About us. About Mom. And there's something else I think you should know." William glanced up from his coffee, feeling his heart rate increase slightly. He had come to expect that there would always be more to uncover about Jennifer and Sarah's past, but that didn't make it any easier to hear. "What is it?" he asked, his voice measured. Sarah took a deep breath, her fingers gently toying with Michael's small hand. "After we talked about Mom and why she hid me from you, I started digging a little deeper. I wanted to understand more about her life and why she made the decisions she did, and I found something that, well, it changes a lot." William's brows furrowed as he placed his coffee mug down on the table. "What do you mean?" Sarah hesitated, then stood up and walked over to the bookshelf. She pulled out a small box that William hadn't noticed before, brought it back to the couch, and set it between them. "This," Sarah said softly, opening the box, "was in Mom's things. It's a letter, but it's not from her. It's from someone else. Someone I think you knew." William's stomach tightened as Sarah handed him the letter. He opened it slowly, scanning the familiar handwriting. It was addressed to Jennifer, but the signature at the bottom made William's heart stop. It was from a man named John, not just any John, but John Stevens, an old friend of William's from years ago. They had lost touch over time, but back then, they had been close, long before William had ever met Jennifer. As he read the letter, William felt a chill run through him. "Jennifer, I don't know if I'll ever have the courage to send this, but I need to write it down for my own peace of mind. We've kept this secret for so long, but now it weighs on me more than ever." William had no clue about what had gone on between us, and I can't keep pretending like everything's normal. I'm not asking you to tell him. I understand how tricky all of this is, but I've never stopped thinking about you or about what we once had. If things were different, I would have fought for you harder. But I know you made your decision. I just hope you're happy, even if it's without me. With love, John. William's hands shook as he finished reading the letter. He stared at it, his mind racing. John and Jennifer. Had there been something between them that he never knew about? Sarah watched him closely, her face filled with sympathy. "I didn't want to tell you right away," she said gently. "I wasn't sure how you'd handle it, but I felt you had a right to know." William couldn't find the words. His heart pounded as the revelation hit him like a wave. He had known John for years, trusted him, and even considered him a friend. But this letter suggested something completely unexpected, something that William had never imagined. "Are you saying," William began, his voice shaky, "are you saying that John and Jennifer?" Sarah nodded slowly, her eyes full of compassion. "I don't know all the details. I don't know when or for how long it went on. But yeah, it looks like they were involved. At some point." William felt like the rug had been pulled out from under him. He stood up and began pacing the small living room, his mind spinning. He had always believed that he and Jennifer shared something deep, something unshakable. But now, this letter made him question everything. Had Jennifer loved John? Had she kept this from him out of fear? Or was there something more that William had never seen? "I can't believe this," William muttered, his voice barely audible. "I don't even know what to think." Sarah got up and walked over, placing her hand on his arm. "I know this is tough, William. Believe me, I've struggled with it too. But I don't think Mom ever wanted to hurt you. I think she was just scared, like she was about so many other things." William swallowed hard, feeling a storm of anger and sadness swirl inside him. He had spent years mourning Jennifer, grieving for the life they'd lost. And now it felt like his entire life had been built on deception, hiding secrets he never knew existed. "What do we do with this?" William asked, his voice cracking with emotion. "How do we even move forward from here?" Sarah exhaled, her eyes clouded with the same doubt William was grappling with. "I don't know. I wish I had the answers, but I think it's just going to take time. Time to sort through everything. Time to make sense of it all." William slowly nodded, his mind still reeling. He wasn't sure how to move forward or how to come to terms with his feelings for Jennifer now that he knew the truth about her and John. But one thing he knew for sure: he couldn't lose Sarah. Not after everything they had endured together. "I don't want to lose you," William said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Whatever happens, no matter what we discover, I don't want this to come between us." Sarah looked at him, her expression softening. "You won't lose me, William. We're in this together." William took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. It wasn't exactly the reassurance he had hoped for, but for now, it was enough. It was enough. Over the next few days, the revelation about John Stevens consumed William. He tried to piece it all together to make sense of it, but no matter how hard he thought, the answers seemed out of reach. His mind wandered through old memories, replaying moments with both Jennifer and John, hoping to find some clue that could have hinted at the truth. But there was nothing. No single moment stood out. No suspicion had ever crossed his mind. How could he have missed it? William found himself pacing his apartment into the late hours of the night, sleep eluding him. The letter Sarah had uncovered was all he could think about, raising endless questions. Had Jennifer truly loved John? Was it just a fleeting affair? Or was it something deeper? And why hadn't John ever come clean? More than anything, William felt deeply betrayed. He had trusted them both, Jennifer as his wife and John as one of his closest friends. Now, that trust was shattered, replaced with a persistent feeling of doubt that gnawed at him. The next morning, William had reached a breaking point. He couldn't live with the questions that had haunted him for so long. He needed clarity. After some digging, he managed to track down John's contact information. It had been years since they last spoke, ever since their friendship unraveled after Jennifer's passing. But William couldn't let this go anymore. He had to face John. With his heart racing, William dialed the number. The phone rang a few times before a voice, familiar yet aged, picked up. "Hello?" John sounded older and wearier than William had imagined, but unmistakably him. "John," William said, his voice taut. "It's William Collins." There was a pause on the other end. William could sense the hesitation in John's voice as he finally responded, "William, it's been a while." "Yeah, it has," William replied, doing his best to stay composed, even though the tension was bubbling inside him. "I need to talk to you. About Jennifer." Another pause. "Jennifer?" John's tone was guarded, almost like he knew where this was headed. "What about her?" "I found a letter." William's words came out sharper now. "A letter you wrote to her, about something between the two of you. I think you know what I'm talking about." A heavy silence followed, and William could feel the weight of the unspoken words lingering between them. When John finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, resigned. "I didn't think you'd ever find out." William's jaw clenched, the confirmation hitting hard. "So, it's true then? You and Jennifer? What was it, John? An affair? A one-time thing?" John exhaled slowly. "It wasn't like that, William. It wasn't an affair. It was complicated." William's anger surged. "Complicated? That's your excuse. I trusted you, John. You were my friend." "I know," John said, his voice thick with regret. "I never wanted to hurt you, William. And I don't think Jennifer did either. What happened? It was a mistake. But it wasn't what you think. William's grip on the phone tightened. So, explain it to me. From where I stand, it seems like both of you hid something huge from me. John hesitated again. When he finally spoke, his voice was soft, almost defeated. It happened a long time ago, way before you and Jennifer got serious. We had a brief moment, but it didn't last. Jennifer chose you, William. She loved you. Whatever we had was over long before you two got married. William's heart was racing. It may have ended, but that didn't make the betrayal any easier to swallow. Why didn't either of you tell me? He asked. I don't know, John admitted. At first, it didn't seem like it mattered. It was in the past, and we'd both moved on. But as time passed, we got scared of what it might do to you and your marriage. And after Jennifer died, I couldn't bring myself to tell you. I didn't want to add to your grief. William shook his head, his anger bubbling just beneath the surface. You thought keeping it from me was better. You didn't think I deserved to know the truth? John's voice was heavy with regret. I'm not sure, William. At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing. But looking back, maybe I should have told you. William felt a tightness in his chest. He wanted to scream to let out all the frustration and anger that had been building since he read the letter. But at the same time, he was exhausted. The weight of all the secrets and lies was too much to handle. I don't even know what to say to you, John, William finally said, his voice strained. I don't know how to deal with this. I get it, John replied softly. I'm truly sorry, William. If I could go back and change things, I would. But all I can do now is apologize and hope you might find it in you to forgive me. Forgiveness. William didn't know if he was capable of that right now. The hurt was still too raw, too new. But part of him knew that holding on to the anger wouldn't bring him any peace either. I don't know if I can forgive you, John, William said, being honest, but I appreciate you coming clean. There was a long silence before John spoke again. If you ever need to talk, I'm here. I know it's a lot to take in, but I'm willing to answer any questions you have. William wasn't sure if he wanted to hear more. Time to think. Time to mend. I just need a little space. William finally spoke. I'm not sure what happens next, but I need to figure it out. Take all the time you need, John responded gently. I'm really sorry, William. Truly. The call ended, and William stood there, motionless, for what felt like forever, the phone still in his hand. His thoughts churned, battling conflicting feelings. He knew the truth now, or at least part of it, but it didn't give him the closure he had hoped for. If anything, it left him feeling more adrift than ever. Later that night, William sat down with Sarah to recount his conversation with John. She listened quietly, her expression neutral, though he could tell the same storm of emotions was stirring behind her eyes. I don't even know what to think anymore, William confessed, his voice thick with fatigue. I thought knowing the truth would help, but now I just feel lost. Sarah nodded, her hand resting on Michael's back as he napped in her arms. I understand. I've been wrestling with the same thing. But maybe the truth isn't always about finding closure. Maybe it's more about coming to terms with the past so we can figure out how to move ahead. William looked at her, a wave of gratitude washing over him. Despite everything, they were still here, facing the unknown together. And for now, maybe that was enough. I think you're right, William said softly. I don't know what's next, but I want to figure it out with you. Sarah gave him a warm smile, her eyes full of understanding. "We'll figure it out," she said, her voice gentle, "one step at a time." As William sat with his daughter and grandson, he realized that even after all the heartache and confusion, there was still something worth holding on to. The truth had been tangled, painful, and messy, but it had also drawn him closer to Sarah and Michael. And for the first time in what felt like forever, William sensed a flicker of hope for the road ahead. In the weeks after his talk with John, William spent a lot of time reflecting. The truth about Jennifer, about John, forced him to face a past he never expected to revisit. He found himself bouncing between anger and sorrow, but slowly, day by day, something new began to grow, a sense of acceptance. It wasn't easy. William still woke up some mornings, feeling the lingering sting of betrayal, the dull pain of realizing he never knew the whole truth about Jennifer. But over time, he began to understand that the past, no matter how much it hurt, was set in stone. What really mattered now was how he handled it and what he did with the time ahead of him. Through it all, Sarah had been there, a steady presence. Their relationship, though still delicate, was getting stronger with each passing day. She had let him into her world, into Michael's life, and in doing so, had given William something to keep striving for. One afternoon, William found himself at the park with Sarah and Michael. The weather was warm, and the sunlight bathed the grass in a soft glow as they walked along the path. Michael was in his stroller, babbling happily as Sarah pushed him along. William strolled beside them, feeling a peace he hadn't known in ages. They stopped by a bench near the lake, and Sarah motioned for William to sit. She unbuckled Michael from the stroller, placing him on her lap with a smile as he wriggled in excitement at the sight of ducks swimming nearby. "Hard to believe how much he's grown already," William said, watching Michael with a smile. "Yeah, feels like he was just a baby yesterday," Sarah replied, her voice filled with warmth. She looked over at William, her expression thoughtful. "I'm really glad you're here, William. I know it's been tough, but I'm happy we're figuring things out together." William felt his throat tighten. He had been waiting for some sign, any sign, that they were headed in the right direction. "I'm glad too," he said softly. "I've made plenty of mistakes, and there's a lot I wish I could undo. But I'm thankful for this, for you and Michael." Sarah nodded, her eyes meeting his with a kindness that hadn't been there in the beginning. "It's been hard for both of us, but we're here now, and that's what counts." They sat in a quiet, easy silence, watching the ducks gliding across the lake. William's thoughts wandered back to everything that had brought him to this point, the grief, the secrets, the hard truths. But for once, it didn't weigh him down. Instead, he felt a sense of clarity. "I've been thinking a lot," William said, breaking the silence after a while, "about the past, about everything. And I realized holding on to all that anger and pain, it doesn't do anyone any good. I'm not sure if I'll ever fully grasp why Jennifer made the choices she did, but I think I'm finally ready to stop searching for answers." Sarah glanced at him, her face both gentle and serious. "That's a big step, William. I know this has been tough for you," she said softly. William nodded. "It has been. But I don't want the past to dictate what comes next. I want to focus on what we have now, and being there for you and Michael." Sarah smiled, her eyes full of gratitude. "That means a lot, William. I know this journey hasn't been easy for any of us, but I think you're right. We can't rewrite the past, but we can decide how we move forward." William felt a sense of relief wash over him. The pain wasn't gone. It would always be there, just beneath the surface. But now, it no longer felt like something too heavy to bear. He had found something else, something more powerful, a new sense of purpose. As they continued sitting by the lake, Sarah shifted in her seat, her voice hesitant, but filled with hope. "You know, I've been thinking a lot about Michael. He's going to need people in his life who care about him, who love him. And I think you could be a big part of that, if you want to be." William's heart swelled at her words. "I want that more than anything," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I want to be part of his life, part of yours." Sarah's smile widened and tears shimmered in her eyes. "I'm really happy to hear that because I think he could really use a grandfather." The word hit William in a way he hadn't expected, but in the best possible way. Grandfather. It wasn't a role he'd ever pictured for himself, especially after all the years spent alone, lost in grief. But now, it felt like the most meaningful role he could ever take on. "I'd be honored," William whispered, his voice barely audible. "I don't know how good I'll be at it, but I'll give it my best." Sarah chuckled softly, her hand resting on Michael's tiny foot. "That's all we can do, right? Just give it our best." They sat together, watching as Michael giggled at the ducks nearby. And for the first time in a very long time, William felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Over the following months, his life began to change in ways he never imagined possible. He and Sarah had grown closer, slowly working through the complexities of their relationship with openness and understanding. While there were still moments of friction and unresolved questions, they were learning how to tackle those obstacles side by side. William also started to take a more active role in Michael's life. He found himself eagerly anticipating the moments he spent with his grandson, whether it was pushing him on the swings at the park, reading bedtime stories, or simply observing Michael's fascination with the world around him. This brought William a new kind of happiness, one he hadn't realized he was capable of experiencing. Through it all, he learned to let go of the resentment and anger that had once dominated him. He accepted that he would never have all the answers about Jennifer, and that some questions were better left unanswered. What mattered now was moving forward, the life he was creating with Sarah and Michael, the family he was beginning to rebuild. One evening, as William sat in his apartment, gazing out at the city skyline, he reflected on how much had shifted. A sense of connection and belonging that he hadn't experienced in years had taken the place of the isolation that once defined him. He still visited Jennifer's grave occasionally, but those visits were different now. They were less about grieving and more about contemplation. He had loved her deeply, and that love would always remain part of him. But he knew it was time to let her go, to make space for the life he had discovered with Sarah and Michael. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden light over the city, William felt a quiet sense of peace. It wasn't the life he had envisioned long ago, but it was one he had come to treasure. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to believe that, despite the uncertainties ahead, the future could be bright with hope.